I'm the one who's kind of convening the meeting tonight. So I'd like to welcome you all. It's 7 o'clock. I like to honor those who got here on time and start our meeting. So this is a WILPF San Jose meeting, our monthly third Friday monthly meeting. And we have been hosting these virtually for the last 14, 15, 16 months. So we welcome everybody here who didn't have to drive. That's wonderful for all of us. What isn't wonderful is we don't get to see each other in person. So it's a trade-off. But at any rate, WILPF
good for the environment.
WILPF is over 100 years old. It is a peace party, a peace organization. Its origins go back to women protesting entering the world, what was called the Great War in 1915. And they do have a website, WILPF, WILPF and take a look at some of our history and what we do. So I'd like to welcome everyone. We have a tradition of opening our meetings, the Raging Grannies. Now, you know how this goes. You can't sing together at virtual meetings. It doesn't work. It turns rather cacophonous. So does everyone know how to do their mute button? You know where mute is?
On the left?
Wherever it is. It's on different places on different devices. So we're going to ask everyone to mute, but so you can sing your hearts out. And Rowan is going to lead us in singing. We sing 2 songs to start with. I'll share the screen. Everybody knows how to make that screen bigger or lesser, right? Everybody's muted. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and then mute myself and turn it over to Rowan. Here we go. Rowan.
Oh, we're climate crisis activists. Yes, we're climate crisis activists. We like clean air and clean water and our rivers in good order. Yes, we're climate crisis activists. Oh, we don't like energy from fossil fuels. And we know that pipelines leak. We ain't no fools. We'd rather hear wind turbines squeaking than see all those pipelines leaking. So we're climate crisis activists. We've seen drilling, we've seen spilling in our time. Now it's time to put our bodies on the line. We don't want their gas and oil mucking up our earth and soil, 'cause we're climate crisis activists. Yes, we're climate crisis activists. So when people mess with Mother Earth, it makes us pissed. So get out and tell the others that the earth is still our mother, and become climate crisis activists. My subtitles went over the last line, so it probably wasn't what I sang. Okay. This is to What Should We Do with the Drunken Sailor? What shall we do with a climate crisis? What shall we do with a climate crisis? What shall we do with a climate crisis? Learn this very evening. Climate change is really happening. Climate change is really happening. Climate change is really happening. The weather's getting worse. Hotter summers, colder winters, droughts in Greenland, ice caps melting. Warmest year on Earth on record, 2020 it was. Here's some ways to help this crisis. Here's some ways to help this crisis. Here's some ways to help this crisis. Start this very evening. Take the bus, don't drive alone. Take the bus, don't drive alone. Take the bus, don't drive alone. Fund public transportation. Feed the corn right to the people. Feed the corn right to the people. Feed the corn right to the people. Skip cows and pigs and chickens. Fossil fuels, stop the subsidies. Fossil fuels, stop the subsidies. Fossil fuels, stop the subsidies. Fund clean energy. Save the forests and the trees, save the forests and the trees, save the forests and the trees, no grazing in the Amazon. Climate change is really happening, climate change is really happening, climate change is really happening. There's so much we can do. And I heard today that the Amazon is now making more carbon
Yes,
than it's absorbing.
yes. We just heard that. I did. Oh yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. We have a full schedule. We have a 90-minute interactive program that the Grandmothers for a Green New Deal agreed to present tonight to the WILPF chapter. They are a group from the East Bay. Both presenters tonight are from Berkeley. Let's see, Virginia, or Virginia, Oakland and Berkeley. I didn't look. And I will let them introduce themselves, but we're in for a treat. Please welcome, with our gratitude, Martha and Virginia with Grandmothers for a Green New Deal. Hey, Martha and Virginia.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. And I'm Martha, your first presenter.
And hi, I'm Virginia Morris, your second presenter.
And we really appreciate that you're joining us for this conversation. Virginia and I will be presenting details about the Green New Deal and subsequent developments since 2019 when the resolution was first introduced. But we're counting on all of you to participate in this conversation and to continue the conversation beyond the boundaries of tonight's Zoom, which I know you will. And this is because the future depends on us.
And while we're considering the future, we're living for the generations that follow us. We know that we all stand on the shoulders of someone who's gone before us, or we are standing with someone who is by our side today. So as part of our group introduction, we'd like you to call in mind an ancestor or a living person whose spirit inspires you. Take a moment, close your eyes, and recall the spirit of this person. Open your eyes now. And when I call on you, please state your name and where you're from. And please share your ancestor's name or the person who inspires you, and 1 or 2 descriptive words about them. Okay, I'm going to start with Rowan.
Hi, my name is Rowan, and I'm on unceded Tamian Ohlone land in San Jose, California. And my ancestor is my mother, Joanne Comer, who taught me that it's possible to make the world a better place.
Thank you. Fantastic. Martha.
Martha Kane in Berkeley, as you know. And behind me, over my shoulder there, is a portrait of my grandmother, Alma Mahern Mahan. And I'm honoring her for her ability to listen and to encourage.
Thank you. Paula.
Paula Rochelle, and I am in a city called Saratoga, but it is Ohlone Tamian land as well. And the person I thought of who inspires me is Nancy Truher, who some of you know, because she is so singularly dedicated to educating people about the issue of climate change. That is her cause. And she just, if anything else comes up, that's where she goes. And it's really inspiring to see her activism and what she does with it. She has a book club that's been going for half a dozen years. And that she
Fantastic.
leads.
Fantastic. I'm going to move on just because I'm trying to get just a few words to the person, but that is fantastic. Next person is Essie.
Me? Oh, well, I think my dad, because he inspired me. He left his village when he was 9, and he became a successful businessman, and he left a legend, and we're writing his story. Soon it's coming out.
Fantastic.
Legend of Veer Singh. He was Indian guy.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Next.
Amy.
Yeah, I'm Amy and in San Jose. And my mother inspired me. She was an activist, and she was a environmentalist, even in the 70s, and having a bag, recycling things and bringing bags to the store and stuff.
Beautiful. Sally.
Who, me?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be mute.
No, you can speak.
Sally is actually an observer today, but I'm going to ask her to anyway, if she wants to say who inspired her.
Yeah, okay. I'm always inspired by my own mother, who's with me in spirit and was a very gentle, loving person. And I honor her spirit.
Beautiful. Thank you. Joan.
Hi, yes, I'm Joan Goddard in Campbell, and which is, as I understand it, Tamian Ohlone land. And I am still inspired by my mother, who was a science teacher and then activist, working with groups and individually on environmental and other issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Shirley.
Hi, I'm Shirley Lynn Kinoshita, and I live in Cupertino, home of Apple Computer. I'm trying to think of just one person, but my father was very inspirational. I think he practiced climate change good practices well before it was even thought of. He's gone now, but locally there's someone named Debbie Mytels, who I really admire for the work she's done in climate change in our area. So she has a climate change philosophy that is very influential. So I think she started the Interfaith Power and Light, which is a whole movement in itself. So I think that's who I admire currently.
Thank you. This is Penny. Turn your mute off.
Oh, my ancestor was named Portia too, and she, I live in San Jose, she lived in Chicago, and she was a patriot and a pioneer.
Beautiful. Okay, Judy.
I would say my father, I live on Ohlone land as well. My father was the gardener in our family, and I always helped him work on the compost, and sometimes I tread on the roses and ate the carrots when I wasn't supposed to, when I was little. And when we would take walks, there was sort of a farm behind our subdivision that was a U-shaped road, and he would name the plants and ask me what I thought about the creek, and just pointed out nature, and we'd look at stars together. So my dad.
Thank you. Thank you. And Lotus Yi Fong, are you on?
Yes, I just moved down to Menlo Park near my 3 grandchildren, and I know Shirley.
Whoops, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Can everyone hear Lotus?
No.
Okay. Lotus, is your volume on? Your audio?
I think Virginia will have to come back to her at another point.
Okay, great. And I'll just quickly say my mother, Virginia Moorhead, is my inspiration. Loved flowers and loved to grow things. Okay. I feel a lot more people in the room than when we started. We're going to need everyone's energy moving forward. Martha.
So just a couple of housekeeping issues. I assume all of you are in gallery view. It sounded like folks are pretty familiar with using Zoom and playing around with the settings to optimize the video that you'll be seeing today. We'll use chat a little bit to drop some links in there. And since you're all comfortable with one another, I don't think this is really an issue, but if you're not someone who usually talks, we encourage you to step up. And if you're someone who's talkative, we still want to hear from you, and we just want you to think about sharing the stage. And I'm going to start by just sharing our first image here. You can see if you can see everything as you should. Okay, here it is. Our agenda for tonight, and in the upper the upper part of your screen, you'll see that you're sharing, probably it'll say you're sharing Rowan's screen. And to the right of it, there's a setting that says view options, and we recommend fit to window and side-by-side mode. So you can play around with that to see what works for you. It won't affect the rest of us. I'll turn it to you, Virginia.
Okay, so we see the Green New Deal as a blueprint. Are you hearing an echo? All right. Okay, we see the Green New Deal as a blueprint for a sustainable future. Today's 90-minute workshop is structured around our 17-minute video, A Path Forward. The video is in 4 segments. So as you see from the agenda, we will stop in between each segment to discuss issues, ask you questions, and hear your ideas. Okay, Martha, please play the first segment.
Okay, I will.
The COVID pandemic, Black Lives Matter. It feels like the world's been turned upside down.
And of course, there's the climate crisis, threatening the support systems of life on Earth. We don't have much time left to put the brakes on that one.
But we're beginning to see all these problems through a new lens, and to understand that the 3 crises of pandemic, racial injustice, and climate are connected.
The Green New Deal is showing us a path forward.
It says that the only real way to tackle the climate crisis is to transform the very foundations of our economy.
So we'd like to tell you about the Green New Deal, a remarkably ambitious and visionary proposal.
At the end, there are some things that you can do right now to spread the word and light a fire under our government.
We are Grandmothers for a Green New Deal, a group of elder women who care fiercely about our grandchildren and the world we are leaving them.
All of us are being hit by the climate crisis, but people of color, like some of my family, are most vulnerable. So I worry in particular about the future of young people, like my granddaughter.
I'm not a grandmother in the biological sense, but like all of us, I see my job as protecting the world's children, including my students, of course.
My granddaughter gets what's going on. At age 12, she calls the climate crisis an apocalypse. And as a Korean American, she understands that our country's racial inequalities are central to climate justice.
My grandbaby is still a bit young to carry her own protest sign, but we're working on it.
What's amazing is that young people around the world, like Greta Thunberg, are actually leading the climate movement today. Here are some of the others.
Varshini Prakash helped write Biden's climate policy.
The Green New Deal fundamentally is a solution that meets the scope and scale and urgency of the climate crisis without leaving any person behind. That's all it is.
A new generation is taking over at 350.org, one of the biggest climate groups worldwide.
We are fighting for environmental justice, which in plain English is jobs, infrastructure, and human health.
Some of these young people, like Hannah Estrada, are still in high school.
We really need you guys to understand how important this is, because depending on what you do right now, that's how future generations are going to remember you, as the generation who either did something and backed us up, or as the generation who left us in the dust.
One path forward is the Green New Deal.
The vision behind the Green New Deal is as big as the crisis it's addressing. For starters, it calls for a full transition to renewable energy by 2030.
But it also demands health, education, and housing for everyone, environmental protection, full employment or a guaranteed income, justice and equality for all.
And that everyone has a say in how all that happens.
Just to be clear, the Green New Deal is not legislation, but a resolution that could be the basis for a lot of legislation if we can get our leaders behind it.
It's being championed in the House by AOC, that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and by Ed Markey in the Senate. And so far, it has substantial backing in the House and growing numbers in the Senate.
Right now, what the Green New Deal needs is a groundswell of support to build these numbers.
As a grandmother, mindful of the human family, I need to be part of this effort.
Okay, so this first video segment introduced the key points of the Green New Deal and the organizations and leadership behind it, with younger people leading the charge. And it emphasized the need to build a groundswell of support for the Green New Deal. In his recent book, this is a great book if you haven't seen it, called On Time and Water, the Icelandic author Andri Magnusson writes, because of climate crisis, an entire generation is being asked not what they want to become, but what they need to become. So we'd like to hear from you. What have you heard from young people, and if you have children or grandchildren, about climate change? What's their response? And if you don't have children or grandchildren, just what have you heard from the young people? Paula.
My granddaughter, who is 13, it makes her very anxious and worried to hear about it a whole lot. She's very concerned.
So my daughter and her husband are both biologists, and they care a lot about the species that are disappearing around us and about our climate crisis.
Yeah, there's people and there's beings, other beings. Judy.
I have a 5-year-old grandnephew, and his mother is a school teacher, a bilingual school teacher, Spanish and English. And they do a garden together, and he has a little sister who's now 2. And we've sent them seeds from our garden here for different crops that they're growing. And he's crazy about beans, of all kinds of beans. And he'll run delightedly into the house with a little handful of beans that he's picked with his mom. And they don't get very much sun. They're up in Seattle. So they have little pots here and there and here and there. And it's wonderful to see him enjoying that and understanding how you have to care for something green and growing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think investing in young children and teaching them new ways or old ways, if you will, is really an important part of this discussion. Any other thoughts on this question of young people and the impact on them or their reactions? Okay. We've heard a couple of responses, and I think, you know, some worry from Paula's granddaughter and some delight from Judy's, and concern from Rowan's daughter and son-in-law. And these responses are expected. I mean, we're all coping with climate trauma, even if we're not fully aware of that. But it's part of what we have to confront as we move forward. So turning it to you, Virginia.
The next segment of the video, "The Time Is Now, Mobilizing the Government," is a longer segment, which will be followed by a longer discussion. Martha.
Okay, here we go.
Let's look at the science behind climate change to understand why this is so very important right now.
The Industrial Revolution kick-started the modern era. It was fueled, literally, by cheap, plentiful energy from burning coal, and then oil, and then natural gas, all of which are composed largely of carbon. Burning all this fossil fuel sent tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide, CO2, and other gases into the atmosphere. These gases form a shield in the atmosphere which traps heat from being released, so the air around the planet heats up like a greenhouse. By 2018, we'd heated up the planet by an additional 1 degree Celsius. That's about 2 degrees Fahrenheit.
But the world keeps pumping more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and the temperature keeps rising. 1 degree doesn't sound like much, but it's already causing havoc around the world.
That's because all this warming air and water is melting the ice caps, changing the jet stream, causing sea level rise, and a lot more. These changes to the planet's systems are themselves creating big impacts, like megafire, drought, floods, and hurricanes, and these weather impacts are affecting our health and livelihood.
In short, global warming is creating a global emergency.
Sometimes it just feels overwhelming. My response is to find the strength, compassion, wisdom, and hopefully humor to push for solutions, like the Green New Deal. So now let's zero in. What exactly does the Green New Deal say?
Well, the goal is net zero by 2030. That means that there is as much carbon being absorbed by the trees, soil, and other carbon sinks as the amount of carbon that is being released into the atmosphere.
How will we do this?
Well, we have to stop burning fossil fuels and get solar, wind, and other renewable power online quickly, a lot of it, and ramp up our research and development for other clean, zero-emission solutions. We also need to create a smart power grid that's energy efficient and decentralized to deliver this power.
All of this is in the Green New Deal resolution.
And the Green New Deal says we'll need big changes in our transportation system too, including affordable electric public transportation, swapping out our gas guzzlers for electric cars, and charging stations in all neighborhoods to make all this run.
The resolution says we'll also need changes in construction, like making our buildings energy and water efficient.
All these steps will lessen the damage brought on by climate change. But we also have to protect people and cities from climate impacts that it is too late to stop.
The Green New Deal calls for resilient cities, especially in low-income communities, so that cities can adapt to extreme weather events brought on by the climate crisis.
But solar panels and windmills are only one part of the puzzle. And here's why. Along with the climate crisis, we're also facing a lot of other critical issues, including income inequality, healthcare, education, housing, and jobs. When I got involved in the climate movement, I started to understand that all these social problems are actually part of the climate emergency. So, the Green New Deal argues that in order to tackle the climate crisis, we have to deal with all these interrelated issues.
When I think about the effects that climate change will have, I guess the impact on our health is the first thing that comes to mind. And as we've all learned, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed critical weaknesses and inequality in our healthcare system. So, the Green New Deal includes universal healthcare for everyone in the U.S. High-quality healthcare is a right, not a privilege.
Then there are jobs. Farming, fishing, and forestry are most at risk due to the climate crisis.
This is really big. Climate change threatens 1.2 billion jobs worldwide. What will that mean for my children, my grandchildren, this whole generation?
But the transition to a clean energy system can create a bounty of new jobs. So jobs are another big focus of the Green New Deal. It calls for millions of high-wage jobs with good benefits, including paid family and medical leave, paid vacations, and a secure retirement. It also demands workplace health and safety. It says that workers must have the right to unionize.
And it calls for a just transition. That means that as we move away from a fossil fuel-based economy, a lot of workers are going to lose their jobs in those industries. We have to ensure that they get the retraining and new jobs they will need so they don't get left behind.
How about education? Underfunded schools are not educating our children well. So how can they learn the science and critical thinking skills they'll need to tackle the tough climate challenges ahead? The Green New Deal sees a good education, including higher education, as part of the climate solution.
Then there's infrastructure and housing. Like most of America's major cities, the airport, sewage treatment system, and bridge ramps where I live are all built along the water, and they are all threatened by sea level rise. The Green New Deal? It requires affordable and safe housing for everyone in the U.S.
Agriculture. Floods are washing away fertile soil, while droughts are reducing crop yields.
So farming is part of the Green New Deal, too. Supporting family farms to create a sustainable system so that everyone has healthy, affordable food.
Biodiversity is being ravaged by climate change around the world. For instance, warming seas and sea level rise have caused the loss of half the world's coral reefs in the last 30 years.
Half the world's reefs in 30 years. I was astonished by that figure.
And 500 million people depend on coral reefs for food, income, and coastal protection.
So environmental protection also factors into the Green New Deal. It says that everyone has a right to clean air, water, and access to nature. And we have to restore and protect threatened and fragile ecosystems.
So this covered a lot. Am I echoing? Can you hear me?
We can hear you and you're not echoing.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So it gave us some very basic history and science behind climate change. It shows how just a few degrees of warming can have tremendous impacts on the planet. It discussed some of the technological changes we need to make. And finally, it pointed out the weaknesses in our current practices and suggested changes we need to make as a society. So for all of us, it's becoming increasingly clear that climate change is here now. It's no longer about the future. So we'd like to take a poll. Raise your hand, please. How many of you have been personally affected by the mega fires and smoke? Okay. Floods or hurricanes? Drought or heat? Yep. Extreme cold. Okay. After these experiences and 30 years of information about climate change, why isn't the whole country crying from the rooftops about this global emergency? Anyone?
Corporations.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes. Sally?
I think we don't make the connection. It's because yes, things have been building up gradually, getting, problems with fires, et cetera, but it seems as if right now there's much more all at the same time. And we haven't quite caught up with the fact that this is not just once in a while, an unusual year. At least I had not.
Right, yeah. Very
Climate
good.
control is in our face. We can't avoid it. We see
Exactly.
the rain, the heat, everything that's climate change.
Exactly.
We have to accept it now.
Right. Judy, did you have your hand up?
Well, I'm just thinking there are so many issues that have become critical. Many of us are working on nuclear issues and the threat of nuclear winter and the threat of environmental pollution. And that involves government, corporations, military. So our attention is fragmented, but we see the shared core of all the things we're working for, and that is to try to ensure a future, a peaceful, prosperous future. And we need to work on all of these things in one way or another. So it's a little overwhelming, I think, to people.
It is very overwhelming. Yes. I saw Shirley. Thank you, Judy. Shirley.
I agree with Judy about it seems overwhelming, but that's the whole point, is that a lot of us are resisting change. I mean, we're comfortable and we don't want to change. And some of the changes cost money and it costs effort. Like we're being told to get solar onto our roofs. It takes a while, and some of us are resisting that for one reason. I heard a National Public Radio broadcast today on the wildfires in California, and people are trying to get back into their homes in wooded areas that were never meant to have people, and they can't get insurance to cover the cost of replacing homes that they've lost. Yet they go back there, they camp out, and they wait for the next fire to come through. We just are people that don't want to change. And an expert on the subject of wildfires said, we as the people have to get involved in the political realm and get our elected officials to make changes and to take responsibility for getting us going, because we are all very resistant.
But the point about resisting change is excellent. Did I miss someone over on the left side here? Somebody else? Anybody else want to say something on why we are not crying from the rooftops yet? Okay, Martha.
Well, I just want to add one other thing, which is that there is disinformation out there too. And that is a problem in a lot of arenas, including in the climate change arena. So that's one of the other challenges we face is getting good information to people. And, envisioning catastrophic futures, actually experiencing catastrophic futures at this point, is going to inevitably trigger anxieties and fear and avoidance. But I think we all know that the antidote to anxiety is facing the truth and steering the course of the crisis. Because when we take action, regardless of how successful we might be in the moment, it serves as an antidote to trauma. And I want to share with you a slide about action versus inaction. It's from the Trump-appointed Commodities Future Trading Commission, it was from a report, and I created the slide with the data from that report. And this was a report that came out in 2020. And it's interesting to look at. So you see this slide here, and basically in their 2020 September report, they determined that decarbonizing the US grid will cost 4.5 trillion. So if you look on the left there, you see a little tiny red bar on the far left that represents 4.5 trillion. But if we continue business as usual, by 2050, the cost of climate and pollution damages will range from 50 trillion to 140 trillion. And you see the bar on the right-hand side, that represents 140 trillion. So this is, like I said, from the Trump-appointed Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And I wonder if anyone has any questions or comments about that slide. Yeah, Joan.
The 50 to 140 trillion is per year.
No, it's by 2050. It'll amount to that.
Will have cost that much.
Yeah, will have cost that much.
Thank you.
Yeah. And actually, I've included the article that this came from in the packet that we're going to make available to you afterward. It's at the very end of the packet for you to look at.
Thank you.
So, Virginia, I'll turn it back to you. Oh, wait a minute. I want to show you another slide here. Let me just put this on. Fortunately, there are organizations that are drilling down and coming up with ideas, kind of building on the Green New Deal about solutions for what's going on. And this is from Project Drawdown. What you see here is the sources of emission and the sinks where carbon dioxide is absorbed. So currently about 40% of the carbon dioxide that's created is absorbed by places like the rainforest, which, as we heard today, is not in such great shape in terms of being that sink. And then sources of emission are listed there on the left, 25% around electricity production, 24% around food, 21% industry, and so on. So this kind of gives us an idea of where we need to move. And then this next slide, Project Drawdown has some solutions. And basically, they're looking at electricity, shifting production, food and agriculture, addressing waste and creating new diets, protecting ecosystems, industry, dealing with refrigerants, handling waste, transportation, moving toward electric vehicles. So I think you get the idea. And then down below where they talk about supporting sinks, how we have to shift our agricultural practices, restore ecosystems. And then of course, they also mention improving society. So Rowan, if you would put the Project Drawdown link in the chat. There's some great videos, and this link will take you to them that Project Drawdown has created. There's 12 to 15-minute videos on solutions. So I suggest that to you. It's also in the packet if you don't want to grab it now, but thank you, Rowan. Okay, turning it to you, Virginia. Oh, wait a minute, Essie, you have a question?
How about less meat, poultry, chicken, beef, and all these? They're causing a lot of pollution.
Right. In their video where they talk about agriculture and land use, they discuss that. Okay. Definitely. The shifting our diets to a different kind of diet is definitely, on the Project Drawdown is the second category where they really need, as a priority, the way we use land.
Thank you.
Judy?
I want to say I'm concerned about electric vehicles and the batteries. The components in the batteries, their recycling. I think that's a big issue because it's not completely polluting, but it will be a source of pollution the more electric vehicles we have. I don't want to go back to horses, which have their own waste products, but I think we need more efficient batteries to operate. I don't know if we can do solar cars, but
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I know that battery technology is something, that's people are working on like crazy. But I mean, your point is well taken. It's a definite issue. Any other thoughts on this particular part? Yeah, Shirley?
Yeah.
I love to follow Judy because she always brings up something that really resonates with me. My husband's field is batteries. He has a PhD in organic chemistry, and he's been a big proponent of electric cars since the very beginning. He worked with the Nissan research group in Japan on developing electric cars, and he told the Nissan people that if you ever create or manufacture an affordable EV, I will buy it. So we have probably one of the pioneer first electric cars for the mass market. We got it in, I think, 2011. So I agree with Judy that there is pollution, but the alternative is to go and just keep driving our fossil fuel cars, which take up a lot of the pollution that we have. We've made great strides, no doubt, in fossil fuel cars, but we really need to switch completely off of fossil fuel.
And using public transit.
Yeah. Yes, Amy, I see you have something to say.
Yeah, we talked about corporations, but it's the people in our government that are taking money and they'll vote against our countries, our world's better interest. And like a lot of people take money for fossil fuels. And so both in the Democratic side and the Republican side, like for instance, when AOC first came in and talked about the Green New Deal, Nancy Pelosi made us out of that green, and she just kind of threw it away because she's taking money from fossil fuels, and so are a lot of other Democrats and a lot of Republicans. So we have to get our government to go not have to get rid of the money in politics, because most of the Republicans take money to vote certainly. So Democrats too, but I'm talking about fossil fuels and industries like that. We have to turn our government around before a lot of things can change. One way is to take money out of politics and have them work for the people. It seems like they work for the rich and the corporations. But I'm afraid that nothing's really changed a lot until we change our government. That's my thoughts.
Thank you. And Amy, who was speaking?
That's my sister, Karen.
Okay, good. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. I mean, I think that as well as fossil fuel subsidies too, which is probably why they take money.
Yes.
Yes. So Virginia, I'll turn it to you now.
Okay, we're going to move on. Let me see a show of hands on this one. How many of you were involved in either writing or calling voters in advance of the 2020 November election or in the Georgia runoff elections for the U.S. Senate? All right, this follows nicely from what Amy was saying, because clearly politics is part of this at the state level, the national level, and even the really local level to get solar panels and things like that in the consciousness of the builders. And, we got a lot of work to do. The good news is that Biden has appointed people on his climate team and in his cabinet with expertise in matters related to climate change. Now we need President Biden, the demonstration today, and his team to step up for the environment. As you know, Biden doesn't use the term Green New Deal. It became toxic for him during the election. He calls his plan Build Back Better. It focuses on green jobs and infrastructure. We see,
go ahead, Virginia.
as the moral North Star. Oh, there's an echo again. I'm not sure what's happening. Or the blueprint of what legislation should look like moving forward. I think maybe on your screen, Martha, that I'm showing. Out of the roots of the Green New Deal, several other initiatives like Build Back Better have emerged, including the Red, Black, and Green New Deal and the Thrive Agenda, which you see here. Okay.
So is anyone aware of the Red, Black, and Green New Deal? So, okay, and the Thrive Agenda? Yes, the Thrive Agenda. So just briefly, a number of climate groups have organized themselves under the banner of the Thrive Agenda, which, like Build Back Better, focuses on green jobs and a just transition for workers in the fossil fuel industry. And then the Red, Black, and Green New Deal focuses on the impact of climate change on Black communities globally. And in the US, they're organizing a national Black climate agenda. There's an interesting article that I put in the packet about the kind of the open secret of the Green New Deal, which is that it's a resolution and it has these various offshoots that have happened from it, including the fact that there's a European New Deal. So the concept of the New Deal is, of the Green New Deal has had a lot of impact, even though there's very little beyond the resolution that's been written about it. And I think that's kind of interesting. Because of the scope of the Green New Deal, as was shown on the previous slide, we also showed an open doorway. And that's because we think there's many portals through which to enter and forward the work of the Green New Deal, because it's quite broad, and we'll be getting into some of those other areas further into the video. So we like people to think about what area of the Green New Deal is something that matters to them that they can work on. And Virginia, I know I took some of your lines there.
That's okay, because I don't know what's happening with the echo. So
Yeah,
I think
it's
we
okay
should just
now.
go to all hands on deck, eh?
Well, not quite yet. Another question for people. We're acutely aware right now with the big question that is always there, how are we going to pay for it? So that's my question to you. How are we going to pay for the Green New Deal? Rowan.
53 cents of every discretionary dollar goes to the military. We need to take that money and use it for our infrastructure, for our jobs, for our Green New Deal. We do not need more nukes. We do not need more troops.
Thank you, Rowan. That seems to have been buried a little bit in recent conversations. Judy?
WILPF has a Move the Money campaign that does focus, that's why I mentioned nuclear issues in my statement, that we have to get at the people who make the budgets and the military contractors and the Congress people who are invested in those corporations and change that, somehow get that money to move to human needs. I'm really afraid that this country is going to drop into a deep recession after all of the expenses the government has charitably undertaken for its people, that we need to think about moving the money from places we don't need it spent to places where we do need it spent to give people help, give companies help that aren't the big corporations. Look at all those executive salaries too, the boards, the whole structure of corporation as a person is embarrassing.
Thank you, Judy. Amy?
I agree that corporations, well, I think corporations should pay more taxes and pay more and be more responsible for things.
In the past, they used to pay like 70 to 90% of tax of their pet taxes. And they didn't complain.
And then the money that we save from retraining people from as mentioned before, from the fossil fuel industry to retraining to the climate situation, that's how we can have more jobs.
Yep.
They won't lose the jobs. That's a false news they're spreading that, oh, people will lose their jobs. No, they'll find good jobs, better ones.
Yeah.
John?
I don't know how much you have done this presentation elsewhere. I imagine you do it with a variety of groups, not all of whom necessarily come up with the military spending, which Rowan very appropriately and pointed out, because it is a huge amount of money that basically, especially the nuclear weapons stuff, but actually a lot of other things, bases, 800 bases in other countries, et cetera, et cetera. Do you find that other people are mentioning that, are aware, or do we need to do an even better job on our part and along with the rest of the peace movement?
Yeah, well, actually, we gave a presentation for the Sierra Club about, I don't know, a few weeks ago. And one of the women on that call brought up the same issue that Rowan brought up straight away. But I haven't heard it as often as I expect to, and I'm part of Northern California War Tax Resistance. So I do think it's something we need to emphasize more. And I'll talk more about the groups we present to at the end. But I see Paula has her hand, and I think Sally had something she wanted to add too, but go ahead, Paula.
So 2 things. We need a personal income tax so that those ultra wealthy pay at the same rate that those of us who aren't pay. I'm not sure how much they would suffer. What's another house or another island or another rocket that they own? And the second thing is we subsidize farm practices, and those subsidies go back to the 30s when we were saving people whose farms they had no income, they were individual farmers. Today, those farm subsidies, which are meant to go to small farmers, are now being the people who benefit from those are not the small farmers. They're giant corporate agriculture companies. We need to totally re-examine and shift our agricultural subsidies. No subsidies go to vegetables. They go to the dairy farmers, they go to the cattle farmers, they go to the chicken farmers. We need to do that. And on that side, I would like to say that if we paid the true price of what it costs, not subsidized, for our fuel and our food, our lives would change and our choices would change big time. I get very uncomfortable. I mean, just share with you, I'm very uncomfortable right now because when we talk about changing, we should all go to electric vehicles. These are huge economic choices that not everybody can afford. A shout out to Amy and Karen who use public transportation, and Rowan who use public transportation, and Essie. But every one of us, let me ask you, who here is a vegetarian? Who here is a vegetarian? Okay, folks, I'm gonna scold you. Look, this is a choice you can make, and it's 24% of that figure you talked about, Martha. And we're sitting here talking about electric vehicles. It's not expensive to eat vegetarian, folks. Anyway, that's my rant. because I get really uncomfortable when we go into these talks and ignore it's not the total responsibilities of individuals to make these changes. That's why I brought up the subsidies, but we have individual choices.
Yeah, it's true. It's a really good point. I've been a vegetarian at times, but right now I'm not. My granddaughter is and has been for many years. So I think it's a big issue in front of all of us. And thank you for raising it, Paula.
Yeah.
I don't know, Martha, if you want me to do the business about addressing the climate emergency. We all need to step up because that's really what Paula is saying.
Right.
And we need an organized effort by governments to mobilize resources and provide leadership in the face of current threats. The good news is the US government has done this before. The Great Depression, the New Deal, mobilization for World War II, and recently vaccine resistance notwithstanding, mobilizing against COVID. What was it about these earlier efforts that led to success? What did they have in common? Anyone?
Well, the Great Depression was forced upon us.
Right? We couldn't avoid it.
Or on our older relatives.
A sense of urgency. We all were, COVID was a sense of urgency. So was the crash, the stock market crash and the depression in 1929 and the 30s.
Exactly. Yeah. Anybody
the
else?
Government was behind it. Public opinion was behind it.
Yeah, the government.
A sense of urgency and emergency and leadership. And what I admire about the Sunrise Movement is that the group of young people studied what brought about change in civil rights and in the peace issues, and it was massive response. People in the streets, people taking action, and they studied all these various successful social political movements and understood that the key is, of course, the government, but the key is the people. We are the people. We need to be the leaders. We need to get into the offices of the Congress, of our senators and representatives, and show that we care in massive numbers. Now, I'm not for big demonstrations necessarily. I'm a little afraid of getting in a large group of people, but it's the people that lead the government.
Yes.
The government should not be leading the people down paths of poverty and destitution and illness by their policies. So
Yes.
I go out every Friday to stand on a street corner, and that's not a massive movement. But if everybody stood out on their street corner and reminded each other that we're in this together, and that's the only way we'll survive, young or old.
Yes, thank you.
That's my
very much.
soapbox.
Yes. Did I see somebody else with their hand up on this one? Okay.
I think Judy gave you your cue there. We're all in this together.
Yes, the next segment is all hands on deck. We need everybody. Exactly. Thank you, Judy.
And it's about the most challenging part of the Green New Deal. So let me share this next section of the video for you.
What I've come to understand is that a lot of these problems are based on income inequality, which is actually higher today than any time since the Great Depression.
And it is the frontline communities, including indigenous peoples,
communities of color,
migrant communities,
women,
the elderly,
the unhoused,
people with disabilities,
and youth, who often bear the brunt of the climate catastrophe.
For one thing, toxic refineries and other industrial sites are usually located in Black and brown communities. And rates of asthma, cancer, and heart disease in these neighborhoods are often sky high. And these underlying health issues make COVID-19 more lethal. This is environmental racism.
Meanwhile, corporations and billionaires are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to influence legislation and to support politicians who will vote for their interests,
including their interest in fossil fuel extraction.
So the Green New Deal puts a big emphasis on justice and equality for all people living in the U.S., especially these vulnerable communities.
And in particular, for Indigenous peoples, it demands informed consent for all decisions that affect their traditional territories.
The developed countries like ours, our governments and industry that created and benefit from this problem, bear a great responsibility.
But everyone has a right to be part of the solution.
I'm glad that the Green New Deal says we must listen to frontline communities. That will create better solutions. And bringing everyone to the table gives everyone a stake in the outcome.
Okay, let's talk about this. Racism has been with us a long time. And now with the term environmental racism, more Americans are beginning to realize that we're all in this together. We want to share with you a quote from Martin Luther King. Martha, do you have a slide?
Yeah, there's a lot to do if we're going to make the Green New Deal a reality. But what can we do?
I find the 3.5% rule an inspiration. Harvard researcher Erica Chenoweth says it only takes 3.5% of the population actively participating in nonviolent protest to ensure serious political change.
The pandemic is creating a challenge for activists.
Something happened there for me. I couldn't hear. Did you get the slide?
I didn't get this. I got the slide, but then we went right into the next segment. So,
so you mean the video started playing?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. That's my mistake. Let me see what happened. Sorry about that.
Well, it did actually reiterate one of the things that had just been said, which is it only takes 3.5% of the people mobilizing to get something happening. So the content was synchronicitous, but we want to talk a little bit about what racism before we get to that.
Yeah.
So
let me go back to that slide. I'm sorry about that. My sound went off for a minute. I apologize. Let me go back to this slide.
So Dr. King said in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. Whites, it must frankly be said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to re-educate themselves. There's an echo.
It's okay, go ahead.
It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people
Virginia, you muted. You're mute. Virginia, you're muted.
Can we get the slide back? It had some really good words there.
Okay, I'll put it back. Virginia, you're muted, so I'm not sure.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about this technological challenge here.
We do today. We're yeah. Okay. Any reactions to this? To this slide? Let me see. Okay,
go ahead and call out because it's hard to see when we're sharing.
That's right. Anybody just call out if you have a reaction to this.
Well, I think that was a very important book then and now. That's why I'm part of the new Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
Yes.
Exactly. Joan.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, the Poor People's Campaign is reviving a lot of quotes that we may or may not be hearing from Martin Luther King. I was just said something about that he said or wrote, 50 years ago plus, but it's still true. And So question is how to get it out there even more again. Lots of echo. Sorry.
Right. Are you having an echo, everybody? Raise your hands if you're having an echo.
I think if you don't share the file, the echo disappears.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop the share.
But
Virginia, Judy has something to say, I think.
Oh, Judy, thank you.
I'm thinking that Reverend Barber also, of course, in dealing with communities of color, he also always says there are plenty of white people who are suffering. And I think that's adds to the racial issue, an issue of caste. My book group read a book called something like Trash or Poor White Trash. And the history of our country, taking land from others, bringing in rich people to set up plantations eventually in the South, that there's a caste problem, there's a class issue here that many people are lumped into. And we owe to all of them an acknowledgement that most of them aren't to blame for their poverty and poor health and poor education. We have failed them. I wish we had a domestic Peace Corps again to realize that we have a nation in a nation, and that nation is a poor, ignored part of our white culture as well as our racial components.
Excellent point. Yes. Anybody else on that issue?
Well, that we do still have, it may not be called the Domestic Peace Corps, or it may not even be called VISTA, but my sister's been passing out lots and lots of information and knows that other people are passing out information. She's doing it in American Samoa so that people can think about doing something other than going into the military. But she knows from the people who sent her lots of information to hand out that that's going on. So we probably need to know more about it, and it needs to be better known rather than restarted. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Anybody else on this same issue? Okay.
Virginia, wait a minute. Just because it ties in, AOC and Ed Markey introduced into the Senate a climate conservation corps, which I hope takes off. So I just wanted to add that. I mean, I do think creating jobs for young people is a huge factor here.
Yes.
Yes, and there is poverty and class and everything. I agree with that.
Right. Have some of you heard of Ibrahim Kendi's recent book, How to Become an Anti-Racist? Becoming anti-racist is possibly you have. Okay, great. Anybody else? Okay. Becoming an anti-racist.
We brought Ibrahim Kendi to San Jose
you did?
last year. Yes.
Wow. Well, we've got a slide.
Local Faith in Action.
Who did? When? Where? How did I miss that?
Well, I think Martha has a slide about this.
Problem with the language. First of all, his book is about his own journey, which is certainly interesting and instructive, but I saw it more as how he became an anti-racist, if you want to use that. But I think there's a problem with using that word because it too much sounds, to me at least, like how to become, how to put down racists, how to be anti-racist people as opposed to anti-racism.
Yes, the idea, right, exactly. Well, we have a slide. Do you want to do it now, Martha? About
I'll go ahead and put it up.
Okay, because it is about the issues. And while she's putting this up, whoops, echo. Let's just look at it. The slide has A fear zone, a learn. Got it.
Virginia, go ahead.
Okay. There will be an echo because there's a slide, but if you can look at the 3 zones and maybe say where you think you might be in this journey. I wonder if anyone sees a parallel between the journey to become an anti-racist and the journey around the Green New Deal and environmental issues. Joan.
Well, fear could be ignorance and be starting to learn how it causes fear.
I think a lot of us find ourselves, you know, in the learning zone, or sometimes in the fear zone, or maybe sometimes in the growth zone. The issue of comfort that Shirley brought up earlier, you know, change makes us uncomfortable. And I think this issue of confronting the racism on which this country was built, it's an uncomfortable proposition. Joan, I just want to say about Kendi's book, he held every dang person accountable, including himself. You know, he held W.E.B. Du Bois accountable at various points in his book. And anyway, I think it's an ongoing journey here. I think that's clear.
Yeah, there was in our questions for people after the where do you see yourself on the journey, there was another question or a statement saying it's not enough to be a polluter, to not be, sorry, a polluter of the environment. We have to be pro-environment. And so again, it's thinking about the issue or about vegetarianism or about what the things are that being a pro-environment person evoke in us. I wonder if anyone sees the parallel between the journey to become an anti-racist, and we already asked this, and our journey around the Green New Deal. So fear is a big part of it. Denial is a big part. Anything else?
Have to, like I've experienced now here, I notice some discrimination here, but I am opening up to them and listening to them. What is their point of view? And then I kind of talk to them, and then they change a little bit. They open up, you know, they have been like this, and then they open up and you talk to them a little bit, and they see, oh, Essie is different, but she can connect to me, you know, and that it brings the openness. So I'm becoming slowly, I'm getting used to my neighbors. Who say, oh, these immigrants come and take our housing. And that was the first day I kind of say, well, they come here to do our work that we cannot do those work, like picking up the lettuce. And then she kind of realized, no, these are also people, you know. You have to open to them and then bring them in and talk to them, not say, oh, she's a racist, I won't talk to her. Oh, right. No, you have to open up to the opposite side always.
That's a beautiful, beautiful statement. And there's, I don't know, anyone else is aware of Loretta J. Ross, who's a human rights Black professor at Smith. She wrote a book about calling out, calling on, and calling in. Calling out means saying you're a racist, so I can't talk to you. Calling on is beginning to invite them to look at what it is, why it is they've come that way. And calling in is inviting them to discuss with you, just like you did with the people about immigration. It's a whole way to see things from the other person's point of view and call in people on this environmental challenge we have. And we have a lot of work to do, clearly.
But it's getting better.
Anyone else want to say? Yes. Shirley.
I don't know if you know what a blessing Essie is to be with us. She is so positive that, and you know, she can turn around a racist, no doubt about it. She's such a sweetie.
Talk to them, open them.
You know, she and I are probably people of color in this group. So, well, you know, our viewpoint would be very different from the stuff about white angst about the racism issue. It's a little different from our viewpoint. And I was asked last month to do a talk on AAPI hate. There's over 7,000 cases now of people being attacked because they are Asian, and it's related to COVID. So, I don't respond the same way as Essie does. She can make a friend out of anybody, but I am more reserved. So what I discovered from that talk, which I really appreciated, being forced sort of to do it, because I don't usually speak up. I'm doing more. This is for me, this is unusual. I'm speaking up more. And I think it's partly because of that talk. And what fascinated me is people's response to my talk. Some people said they were in tears, and other people didn't even respond, period. So that's okay. Everybody has a different reaction to difficult topics. So I think I like what Essie says. You got
We're
to
all human beings.
friend her.
We have same emotions. We have same.
In the light of friendship, not in the light of you don't like me, I'm not going to deal with you. And that's not the way we can be.
It's changing better, much better.
We need to be in this whole mess that we've created and try to make positive changes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, both of you. It's hard, but we can do it, I think. Yes,
The
Joan.
new generation.
The new generation, yes. We're looking at everything like the elephant from many different ways, because we're all on the planet together. And if we appreciate our differences,
there you go,
and be grateful for these different perspectives, we can, I'm hoping, and I think Martha's hoping, and the rest of us trying to educate people on this, that we can learn together. Did somebody else have their hand up? I missed right there.
I don't think you did, Virginia. And thank you, Shirley and Essie, for sharing what you shared. Certainly listening really goes far. And speaking of that, the movement to address the climate crisis is also finally starting to recognize the leadership of Indigenous communities as water protectors, protecting fossil fuel pipelines across the land. And I think I'm going to share with you this slide. I think many of you are aware of the oil pipelines that are now running across Indigenous lands. Biden halted the Keystone XL pipeline his first day in office. And on June 9th, the company behind the pipeline scrapped the project. Unfortunately, the Standing Rock Dakota Access Pipeline, known as DAPL, is still moving forward. And in this picture here is the current Line 3 pipeline struggle. And then there's a few key groups that we've listed under the slide, which I'll talk briefly about afterwards. But I wondered if I'm going to go back to stop sharing. You're all aware of the Pipeline 3? So no, I don't think there's a need for me to. Does anyone want to summarize kind of what they know, or what y'all have been doing or aware of around that?
Just that it's very, very active right now, and that it's basically in Minnesota, right?
Yeah, taking tar sands from Alberta, Canada, and tar sands are the dirtiest kind of oil, and through a pipeline that goes through Indigenous land in Minnesota. Yeah, I was at a rally at the federal building today related to that. I just want to mention briefly that the other groups that were listed on the slide, that, the Movement for Black Lives, who are behind the Red, Black, and Green New Deal, which we mentioned previously. The Shumi land tax is a voluntary annual contribution that non-Indigenous people living on traditional Lijan Ohlone territory can make to support the critical work of the Sigorte Land Trust. And then Green the Church is an organization that stands at the intersection of the Black church and the environmental movement. We had a meeting with the founder of that, who happens to be here in Berkeley. And so this takes us into the last segment of our video, which I'll play now. And we'll talk a little bit more about line 3 at the end. Let me go to this last section.
This one's called Getting to Work.
The Green New Deal says that the U.S. must become an international leader on climate action. In the process, our economy will grow strong as we innovate and produce the solutions for a new generation.
Yeah, there's a lot to do if we're going to make the Green New Deal a reality. But what can we do?
I find the 3.5% rule an inspiration. Harvard researcher Erica Chenoweth says it only takes 3.5% of the population actively participating in nonviolent protest to ensure serious political change.
The pandemic is creating a challenge for activists, but there's a lot you can do from home right now.
Here is how you can get involved.
For one thing, spread the word about the Green New Deal by telling everyone about this web story. You know what to do. Write your whole email list to friends and family. Ask other groups and organizations to send it out to their list. Post on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, every social media platform you have.
And get your climate message out with a banner drop, or signs in your windows, or posters in the neighborhood.
Get government leaders to take action on the climate and get climate champions elected.
Tell the banks that are funding oil pipelines what you think of them with a Yelp review, or get your friends together and write 50 reviews.
And join a climate group. Community is power. If you are an elder, check out Elders Climate Action or the 1,000 Grandmothers for Future Generations. If you're a bit younger than us, Sunrise is the youth group leading the Green New Deal charge. There's 350.org and Extinction Rebellion and Idle No More and Climate Justice Alliance. The movement is growing.
When it's safe, we'll be marching again. We hope to see you there.
As elders, we hear our children and grandchildren. We join them as allies in this struggle for their future. It is our legacy to them.
Thank you. So, it's obvious that we need to keep our activism alive. I know you all know that. But I'd like to hear from you. What do you need to help you feel more successful in this struggle to address climate change?
Every chance I get, I talk. My doctor's office, I'm sitting with the neighbor or the mailman or whatever. I put in my little gig, and I always carry the little cards that Miss Rowan has printed. And I showed it today to 3 people. And I said, oh, wow, my physical therapist. Oh, they don't even know where is Raging Granny. Little bits of, you have to put in your plug whenever you have a chance. People don't know because it's not shown in the news or anything.
Yeah.
Thank you for keeping the conversation alive. Shirley?
I was sort of going to ask your leaders here, what was your reaction to the Raging Granny song? We sang at a Sierra Club event, And some people called us communists for the song we were singing. So I said, are we that controversial? I just still can't get over being called a communist because we're singing environmental songs.
Well, I loved your song.
Yeah, me too. I was so on the nose. I think it was a second one. I was thinking, this is everything that we're talking about today. So I feel like you already know, in some ways, we're preaching to the choir here with this presentation, but we're just trying to broaden it and maybe even ask people to show it to other people who don't know yet, But I love the songs.
What was your original question? What makes you makes you feel like you're not effective? Is that the question?
No, what do you need to help you feel more successful in this struggle to address climate change?
More success. I mean, let's just face it. More success. It's having support is really helpful. So around the food issue, which I'm very passionate about, when I'm around people that share that from the perspective of health and climate change and impact on the animals, the ethics of that, it is so powerful. When I go to the climate change book club, Shirley has started coming to that. Debbie Mitel's and our own raging granny Nancy Trueher lead. It's just feeling that support helps me feel successful, even though I look around and we're singing to the choir, we're the same people, nobody new shows up. So, I don't know if we are successful or just making ourselves feel good.
Yeah, I appreciate Essie's point that she speaks about it whenever she can, if she's at her physical therapist or wherever she is. And at the risk of, maybe sometimes being a broken record, I think I feel that same urge. Like there's hardly an opportunity that I should let go by. And I hear what you're saying, Paula, definitely when you are acting with other people, there's a positive feeling. And Virginia alluded to the fact that we are sort of preaching to the choir here. Joan, you asked earlier about what kind of reactions we get from people when we show different aspects of this workshop. And I think what we haven't managed to quite do yet is get even to the congregation. I think there's people out there who are on the fringes of our lives who, share our values, but aren't active. And so that's an ongoing question for us. And we would really appreciate any ideas that you might have about how to reach through a church group, civic group, friend group, that kind of thing. We are going to send you a packet. We're going to ask Joan to send the packet out. We made a PDF of it, which I sent to Rowan. And since we've been giving this workshop, we've spent a lot of time like searching the internet, kind of consolidating who's doing what. So the packet might be useful to you in that regard. And in addition to any ideas you have about how we could share this video or this workshop, and there's some links, Rowan, now, if you want to put them in the chat. They'll also be in the packet. So whichever way you like to capture them is fine. Feel free to share our video far and wide. And also, stopping pipeline 3 is critical. And so in our packet, we have a couple of links to Indivisible and Common Cause that are focusing right now during the month of July before the recess in issues related to voter access. And then stopping pipeline 3, we encourage you to look at the link that says Stop Pipeline 3. And also 1,000 Grandmothers for Future Generations been very active in that. So those are a couple of things that we would love you to, like things you can click on and send a letter to Biden, maybe donate some money. Again, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, and I'm sure that you guys have some things that you would like to promote. And so we're going to wrap up here. I'll turn it to you, Virginia.
Okay, very quickly, I just want to say you've been great today in conversation about the Green New Deal as a blueprint, a North Star, portal into the future. We like to end with a South African proverb. One of the greatest mobilizations in the world was by many peoples of South Africa in the anti-apartheid movement. The South African proverb, Ubuntu, as stated by Bishop Desmond Tutu and President Nelson Mandela, means I am what I am because of who we all are. In the spirit of Ubuntu, let's hold the Green New Deal as part of our narrative moving forward. Let's make Ubuntu and the Green New Deal our legacy to our youth, and in turn to ourselves and to the ancestors who got us here. Martha.
Yeah, so while the workshop is fresh in your mind after we sign off tonight, we'd love it if you would click on the link that Rowan's putting in the chat for our feedback form. It's the last one there. And in there, if there are groups that you can think of, that would be a great place to indicate it, and we will get in touch with you afterwards. So let's keep this conversation alive. Thank you for your participation. I'm turning it back to Paula or Joan or who's ever going to wrap us up.
Thank you, Martha and Virginia. This was a very interesting presentation and conversation. It was very nice to have the participation. So that was really nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you all know how to save the chat, right? Because you know how it goes. The Raging Grannies close out the song. So all of you Raging Grannies and anybody else who is a wannabe.
Of the great meeting, Virginia, Martha, maybe we did this already, but look at
that. Great.
Oh, I have a hat.
It's my daughter's graduation from Berkeley Heights. I'm in her room. And so there we go.
All right. Now, what has to happen is I'll share the screen again, and everybody but Rowan is going to mute, and Rowan's going to lead us in our last song. So first of all, everybody mute except Rowan. Here come the songs, if I can do this. Let's see my songs. Here we go. And
okay, thank you. Clean air, no carbon, a livable planet, water for all and a lot of mass transit, enough food for everyone, that's what we sing. These are a few of our favorite things. There's fossil fuel, a broiling planet, melting glacial spurts, and as our sea level keeps climbing up, we're screaming, this really hurts. Clean air, no carbon, a livable planet, water for all and a lot of mass transit, enough food for everyone, that's what we sing. These are a few of our favorite things, but global warming, climate changing, makes us feel so bad. And as we keep losing our favorite things, it all makes us really mad. So does anybody else want to do When We Make Peace? Shirley, Paula, any of the other grannies? Doesn't have to be the Rowan show. Okay. So we always end our sessions with When We Make Peace. We have lots and lots and lots of verses for it, and these are just a few that we've chosen for today. When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war, when taxes pay for human needs, when taxes pay for human needs, now I want to be in that number. When taxes pay for human needs, when we overcome the climate crisis, when we overcome the climate crisis, how I want to be in that number. When we overcome the climate crisis, when guns are banned in homes and schools, when guns are banned in homes and schools, how I want to be in that number. When guns are banned from homes and schools, when we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rowan, for the tech hosting. Thank you, Martha and Virginia, for coming and leading this wonderful program. And, you know, they couldn't have led it without people showing up to participate. So thank you to everyone who came. And we'll see you at WILPF Congress. Yes? Yes.
Thanks. Nice spending the evening with all of you.